Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me, and thank you for joining the webinar. And today we're going to talk about something that always intrigues me a lot, and I think intrigues a lot of people, which is delving deeper into why we eat what we eat, and how is it related to our feelings, how is it related to our nervous system, our brain, and what can we really do about it. I think the most important part, what can is there something that we can do about it? Is there more control than we actually think? So I'm Dr. Saumya Sharan. I'm a clinical psychologist and the behavioral expert at Heald, and I work with Heald to understand what we do in terms of the information that we get related to diabetes management and reversal, why we do it, and also what are some of the things that are in our control and how can we kind of make it better. So moving forward, and today we are here to really understand our eating habits from a more psychological, from a more biochemical, from a more psychosocial perspective, and see how it's related to how we feel, how we've been brought up, how our cultural perspectives have shaped us, how we think about food, and how can we gain that sense of control back to navigate through it in a way that it works for us and not against us. So, again, very warm welcome, and let's start. Before we start, I'd like to ask this question, which I think is very close to people's hearts, and I'd like to understand a little better. And I would be very happy if everyone can be vulnerable, which is, what is your comfort food? And when I say comfort food, some people call it comfort food, some people say it's their soul food, some people say that it's an indulgence. But what is that one food that when you eat that, it makes you feel like everything's going to be fine? It makes you feel like, your feelings are not so difficult anymore, or your life is not so difficult anymore, at least for a few minutes, at least for some time. Apura, would you like to share what is your comfort food?
Uh, Definitely dal and rice or curd rice.
All right, all right. I think that's more on the healthier side. But is there something that you feel like, sometimes we get into muffins, we get into cheesecakes, and we feel like, if only I can have that, I think everything else is going to be fine and okay. So
Sometimes it's chocolate, right?
sometimes it's chocolates. Yes. So we all have that comfort food. We all have that food that in that moment it makes us feel like whatever we're going through, that's going to just settle down and we're going to feel better, at least after having it. But does that really make things better? Let's understand that part better. So there are some myths that we are addressing today. Apura, would you be taking this up, or should I take this up?
Yes. So the first myth that people, I mean, I'm unsure if it's myth yet. So the first question is sugar addiction is purely about willpower. So is it true or false, doctor?
Okay, so sugar addiction is purely about willpower. So it is false and it is actually a myth. But let's understand this better. So when we talk about sugar addiction or when we talk about processed foods, we talk about things that are high on sugar, synthetic foods, unhealthy foods. It is more to do with how we've been conditioned and how it impacts our nervous system. It is not so much about willpower, but it is a lot about our ability, our skills to feel gratified in that moment. So, what happens is there is a cycle that comes into play. Whenever there is sugary food or there is synthetic food or unhealthy food, what happens is it sets off a false trigger in our nervous system. It acts on the reward centers of our brain, mostly to do with dopamine. And when those reward centers get activated, we feel like this is very comforting. We feel like, we've been rewarded, or we feel like this is a treat for something good that we've done. And as a result, we desire them more. So it really, in a way, it really plays with our mind and it plays with how we think. And when we desire them more, we tend to eat them more. So it's not so much about willpower, but a lot about the gut and brain connection. It is a lot about our skill on gratification and delayed gratification, and also about how we relate to foods culturally. How we see sugary foods as treats, as a reward, or something good or something comforting that you must have. So that's about sugar addiction being related to willpower or not. Moving on, as I was talking about the gut brain connection, I think it's very important to understand that whatever you put inside your mouth, whatever you put in your body, whatever you eat, is it just a very biochemical response, or is there something psychological? Is there something emotional? Is there something, deeper psychosocial that is related to it? Turns out it is. There is actually, according to millions of studies, so many studies, and thankfully studies that are getting more and more kind of recent now. According to research, there seems to be a very strong connection between the gut and the brain, in a way that it is a two-way street. Two-way street meaning that our brain impacts the way our microbial. So I'll kind of skip on the technical terms, but I'll try and put it simply. So put simply, our brain shapes the way the makeup of the gut is, and our gut impacts the way certain elements of the brain or neurotransmitters are. And the response is not just biochemical, but it is also psychological, it is also sociological. Again, put simply, some foods tend to have more impact on the reward centers of the brain, or some foods have more impact on the way we feel, and as a result, we tend to have them more. Some foods have lesser impact on the reward centers of the brain, and as a result, we tend to have them less, but it is to do with other healing effects. So this relationship is really impacted by the type of foods, by the type of medicines, by the type of things you put into your body. And it is very strongly connected with the reward centers in our brain. So it's really, again, put simply, the way we feel about food, the way we are culturally conditioned to respond to certain foods impacts the way we will choose certain foods and not others, especially during some emotional states, like when we are stressed, when we are anxious, or when we are feeling scared, versus how we choose our food when we are not feeling these emotions, or the choices we make when we are more mindful, when we are more intentional about food. So there is actually a gut brain connection, and how we can use it to our advantage is where I come in and tell you that this is much more in your control than we all believe actually. Okay, so
Great.
that's the all right. Over to you, Purva.
I mean, that really opened a lot of channels, Doctor. Thank you so much for highlighting the gut brain connection and what actually happens. So, the next question is feeling guilty about food helps with weight loss. So, is it true or false? Maybe not
Absolutely,
directly, but somewhere does it affect how the decisions that we take?
absolutely not true. In fact, the opposite, I would say. When we feel feelings like guilt or shame about, what you've eaten or what you've consumed or what you've chosen to eat. So just imagine yourself in a situation where you've probably had you're feeling stressed and you had a cupcake, and you're feeling even more stressed because there were also associated feelings of guilt and shame. Now, what happens is there is this vicious cycle, there is a downward spiral that starts if there is guilt and shame attached. Because what happens is guilt and shame makes you feel like you're the only one that's doing it. No one else is doing it. You can't do anything better. You can't make the right choice. You are alone in doing this. And to the extent that it impacts your sense of worthiness. Now, when you start feeling less worthy or not good enough because you've made a choice related to food, you tend to feel even more stress. And this stress impacts your decision making ability. This stress impacts the way, your self belief about can you really make better choices. This stress impacts your emotional regulation. This stress impacts your sleep cycle. So many things going down. It increases the tendency that you will make another choice which is not healthy for you, thus again impacting the weight loss. So put simply, when you're feeling guilty, when you're feeling ashamed about a certain choice that you've made about food, it's going to, if you are able to catch yourself right there and change the internal dialogue and really navigate through that feeling of guilt and shame in a way that it doesn't make you feel like you're bullying yourself, but you're actually able to support yourself, then you're able to make more mindful choices. And that will help with weight loss, not feeling guilty or shameful about it.
Got it, doctor. Just a continuation to whatever you've just highlighted. So sometimes when you feel guilty, right? So as an action, you try to do something that will sort it out, right? So how does that work? So is guilt always a negative feeling, or can guilt lead you to take actions, the right actions?
Right, a very interesting question, Pooja. A lot of times, we're very quick to go get into this is a positive feeling and this is a negative feeling. I think it all depends on what is positive or what is not positive. Will always depend upon, is it serving you or is it helpful for you or is it not helpful for you? So we all feel guilt. We all feel shame. It is a universal. These are all universal emotions. Now, as soon as you feel that, what happens is there is an internal dialogue that goes on in your mind. There is a voice that tells you. Now, how that voice talks to you will really determine the next choice you make. I'm not saying you do away with guilt or you escape the guilt or guilt is not right. We all feel it. We need to accept and understand that we all go through it. Now, understanding and accepting will make you feel like, okay, I'm feeling guilt, but is there something that I can do about my choice? That will be determined by you giving yourself a compassionate space to hold on to or a very critical space. Now, if from guilt comes a critical space, then you're telling yourself you can't do anything right. Let it be. Even the next, it's not going to make a difference. Now just go down the spiral and let the next choice be whatever you want. And you end up eating whatever you want. But from guilt, you take a moment and you understand, well, yes, I made a choice and I'm not too happy about it. But, sometimes we all make choices we're not happy about. But does that mean the next choice can't be something that is intentional or mindful? No, it can be something that is more intentional and mindful, and you make a different choice. So, guilt essentially is not the problem. But what happens after guilt or how you take to guilt is really what will determine your next choice.
Great explanation, doctor. I really like the way that you separated positive and negative so simply, that anything that helps us in turn, especially feelings, anything that helps us will be positive, and anything that is not helping your body is a negative feeling. I think that's a great way of explaining it. Yes, doctor, over to you.
All right, thanks, Apurva. All right, so moving on. So let's talk about effect of cortisol on blood sugar levels. But before that, I want to talk about something that I find very interesting. So cortisol, as we all know, is the hormone, is the part of a chemical that goes that increases significantly when we are under stress. So it is essentially called the stress hormone. So the levels of cortisol increase significantly when we are under a state of stress. Now let's face it, almost all of us go through, stress in our daily lives, or significantly in our lives at some level. But how do we respond to this stress? It depends a lot on how we feel, how we think, and also our cultural conditioning. Also, how what we've learned while growing up. Now, let's understand this better. A lot of times while growing up, it was told to us, or we learned that, what, you're having a bad day. Why don't you have some ice cream? Or you're not feeling happy today, or school was not good, or probably you didn't get, marks, you didn't perform the way you wanted to. How about some hot chocolate? That'll make you feel comfortable. Or how about some chocolate? How about some candy? That's going to make you feel happy. And we ended up doing that to the extent that it got associated in our mind for us. So for us, it meant that sugary foods or synthetic foods or junk foods or chocolates or, marshmallows or muffins, all of these things were like comfort for us. Or if you did well, oh, we deserve an ice cream. Or if you performed well, you deserve that cheesecake, that chocolate. It was either treat or it was a reward for a good job. Now, or it was comfort. So what did that lead to? It meant that all of these foods that we call, kind of indulgent, so-called indulgent foods, triggered a dopamine response. Dopamine response is basically that part of the brain which makes us feel rewarded, like accomplished. So every time you would do something, you felt like, I must eat a chocolate because that's my reward for doing something good. Now, every time this would happen, the reward part of your brain would get activated. And then this would also mean that the biochemistry of the brain would get hijacked, which meant that for some time you would feel rewarded or you would feel okay. But after some time, you'd probably end up feeling, as we grew up, of course, not as children, but as we grew up, it became a vicious cycle. We started feeling that, oh, a bad day at work or even a hard day at work, I need to reward myself, meant, or I'm stressed at work or I'm stressed at home. Let me just have this tub of ice cream. Meant that you had that, you made that choice, you had that ice cream. For some time you felt okay, but then eventually it led to guilt and shame, which increased your stress levels. Increased stress levels meant increased cortisol levels. Now, what do high cortisol levels do? High cortisol levels raise your blood glucose. They disrupt your sleep cycle. They disrupt your decision making. They disrupt your ability to regulate emotions. And what happened as a result, that when you were feeling stressed, you had that ice cream. Sometimes you felt okay, but now you're feeling even more stressed and you're not able to make a mindful choice, an intentional choice as your next choice. So you end up having more of junk food because for you, it makes you feel well rewarded or better, or it is a treat, or you feel like, I must have this because at least for some time I'll feel better. So you see how cortisol leads to raised blood sugar levels. So we need to understand that when we are doing, when the motive of eating is not mindful but emotional, so when we're eating from a space of boredom or stress or anxiety or fear or accomplishment for that matter or reward, as we've been conditioned culturally. So it's not you. What I'm trying to say is not you. It's also how we've been brought up, um, and the generations before us being brought up. So it's really to understand that it leads to high glucose levels and it makes you less in a position to make an informed choice as your next one. So you're more likely to go down the spiral and be less closer to a choice that would make you feel healthier, or that would make you feel better, or that would actually be serving your gut, right? So it would lead to more of emotional eating, right? So before we get into this statement, I also want to cover what is the role of dopamine, culture, and trigger. So to understand why we eat, it can be simply put under mindful eating or emotional eating. Mindful is that you understand you're eating because you're nourishing yourself. It is fuel for your body, and you're very intentional about the elements that you put inside your body, and you understand how it's serving you, it's serving your gut, not just in terms of satisfying your hunger, but how is it going to make you feel later. But when it is about emotional eating, it is coming from a space of I want to eat because I want to make myself feel better, or I want to deal with this feeling. And that impacts a specific part of the brain, which gets into a vicious cycle. So it's very difficult to come out of it. And then, as a result, what happens is you're stuck in the cycle, and it's difficult for you to get closer to a clean microbial gut makeup that can actually have a healing effect on the person. So, again, it's not you, it's a lot of the culture. But knowing this, I think knowledge can be very powerful. Awareness can be very enlightening. If you are aware of this, the next time you're making a choice, I think you have more power than you realize. So over to you, Apurva.
So this is really insightful, doctor. So ideally it's the food. I mean, once I'm stressed, I will end up eating junk, and because I'm stressed, the cortisol is already affecting my blood glucose levels. Now that I've had the junk food, that in turn is affecting my body again, because my gut isn't filled with good bacteria. So in turn, that is sending a bad signal to my brain saying that your mood is not going to get better. So there is no end to this. A very nice point that you've covered, that it's a vicious cycle, that it keeps on. It there is nothing. I mean, people only get into it and they can't get out of it. This is really nice,
Mm.
doctor. So one question here, doctor. So mindful eating means people can never eat indulgent foods. So is it like that?
No, actually not. So it's not about, mindful eating is to do with how present you are to the process of eating, and how intentional you are with the choices you're making. So it's not that I would have to sacrifice this, or I would just have, it'll be kind of a punishment. It's just going to get you into a better space of awareness. And when you are more aware of why am I eating this? Am I eating, or why am I eating altogether? Am I eating because I'm hungry, or am I eating because I'm bored, or I'm stressed, or I'm anxious, or I'm scared, or I just looks nice, whatever is there in front of me? So then you'll be able to make choices, whether indulgent or not, is something that you will have more control over. So it's not to do with, sacrifice or punishment or indulgence or reward. It's to do with you feeling more in control in terms of, is this a choice that I want to make right now? And is it stemming from an actual physiological need of being hungry? Or is it stemming from an emotional eating pattern? Because, well, to be very honest, food will never satisfy um, an emotional void within you. So if you're eating out of emotional, an emotional void, or if you're eating from a pattern of emotional eating, emotional hunger is not going to be satisfied with food. We need to delve deeper and understand where is it stemming from. So it's really not about, you can eat whatever you want, but you're going to be more mindful of when to eat, what to eat, how to eat, and you're not going to look at it in terms of I've been told this, but you're actually going to be more in touch with the signals of your body and then make choices as a result.